Okay, so now that we have organized the body of our speech, the biggest main chunk of the middle section of our speech, or the tell them part, we can now look at the other two sections of our speech, which is the introduction and the conclusion. Because your speech will have three main parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Part one of this video talked about outlining the body of our speech. So let's talk now about the introduction and the conclusion. So it would be really helpful, like I mentioned before and in the other video, if you would print off the blank outline that I've provided on Blackboard. It's in the Informative Speeches content folder over there on the left side with all the tabs. You can find that there, along with a couple of other PowerPoints that might be really helpful while working on your informative speeches. Okay, so the introduction of your speech will include 5 parts. You'll have an attention getter, credibility, audience relation, thesis, and preview. And you can see those all listed here on your blank outline. So the very first thing we want to talk about is the attention getter. Okay, so the very first thing out of your mouth when you start your speech will be your attention getter. Okay, it won't be, hey, I'm so-and-so. It won't be, hi, I'm talking about dolphins today. It will be an attention getter. Okay, so an attention getter is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's something to hook us in, right? Or to get the audience's attention and get them on board really quickly. Why is that so important? Well, because if you have something really dull when you start, people are going to check out. You may have already checked out this video because it didn't have an attention getter. I was just like, we're in the middle now, okay? I hope not. I hope you're still here because this has really good information for you. But your attention getter is very important because without a good one, everyone in your audience is going to be like, I'm over this speech immediately. Okay, and you want them to pay attention to you. I promise. You may think you don't want them to because it's less scary, but it's terrible when you're in a room and people are just staring at you or staring off into space or on their phone. You want to hook them in. Okay, so how do you make a good attention getter? Well, there are several different ways that you can do that. One is a statistic. That's a really common attention getter. A shocking statistic, right? Not like 7 out of 15 people might do this thing. You want, 1,000,000 people or 97% of people or 2% of people only have this rare condition, right? Something really shocking, okay? Statistics are really good to start with. Another is a question to the audience. That's a really good start. Now, if you do a question, you want it to be like a yes or no question or like by a show of hands, right? So maybe, how many of you have ever heard of the show I Love Lucy, right? We'll go through this using I Love Lucy as a topic. And this PowerPoint, I will put a PowerPoint that kind of has this on there as well so you can follow along. So, how many of you have ever heard of I Love Lucy? Right? That's a really good attention getter because now you've asked the audience to start thinking about themselves. They've put themselves in the speech, right? And they're interacting with you in some way. It's really good to get people involved. Then you can more likely get them to stay and pay attention. Rhetorical questions, another good one. Maybe if it's something more personal that you don't want people to really answer out loud or people would not feel comfortable raising their hand for, maybe something that you can just think about. Right? Or maybe a hypothetical situation that they can just kind of think about. A video is another really good attention getter. If you have a short video as your visual aid, then you can show that to hook people in. Now, if you show a video, it needs to be 30 seconds or less. All right, because I don't want your 3 to 5 minute speech to be 3 minutes of video and a minute of your speech, right? So the video needs to be 30 seconds or less, and it needs to apply to your topic, right? So maybe you love cat videos, and that's great. They're adorable, but you can't just show like a cat playing with a fan and then talk about the war in Iraq, right? Unless you have a really good reason to make those connect, you can't just show any kind of video that you want just because it's exciting to show a video. And you have to set up the video. You need to make sure that you discuss before or after, maybe you show the video and then you say, as we saw in this video, blah, blah, blah. Or you say, we'll see in this video Susan doing blah, blah, blah. And then show the video, right? You can't just show it and then pretend like you never showed it and talk about something else. Okay, so you make sure that you discuss the video bring it into the show. A riveting fact is another good attention getter, right? So something that's really interesting or unique that people wouldn't know otherwise that connects to your topic, right? So statistics, questions, videos, facts. Some people use quotations. These are all good attention getters. So something to hook us in right off the bat. That's your first step in your introduction. Your next step in your introduction is something called credibility. So credibility is basically, why should the audience trust you? Why should we listen to you about this topic, right? Well, here's where you're going to tell us why we should listen to you right at the beginning. Why would you do that? Well, so that the rest of the speech we know that you know what you're talking about. Okay, so credibility comes in the form of, if you have experience with your topic, if you're talking about baking something and you are a chef or you're a baker, they're different things, I guess, then you want to make sure that you say that in that credibility part. If you don't have any personal experience with it, then you're going to just talk about your research, because everyone will be doing research for this, whether you're an expert in the topic or not, because you need at least 3 sources besides yourself. So everyone will be doing research. So an example of a credibility statement might be something like, not only have I seen every episode of the show, I Love Lucy, I have read several biographies of its star and have done research for this speech, right? So that's you telling us that you know about Lucille Ball, right? So that's a good example of a credibility statement. After you establish your credibility, so you hook them with the attention getter, you establish your credibility, the next thing you're going to talk about is audience relation. So audience relation is exactly what it sounds like. It's relating this speech to the audience in front of you. All right? So basically, you're telling us why we should care. Now, I'm not saying that everyone will care about every topic you choose, but you're telling us why we should care. So, for example, this topic is important because Lucille Ball paved the way for women in comedy and is considered one of the best comedians of the 20th century. That's why we should care about Lucille Ball. Maybe we don't, but that's why we should, right? So whatever your topic is, you want to make sure that the people sitting in front of you, why does this matter to them? And now for this speech, this format, it's kind of unique because you're choosing your own audience. So you might know the people a little bit better even than if you were in a standard classroom or if you didn't know them. So you think about the people that are in front of you and you tell them why you should care about this topic. Why do they care specifically? So you kind of have to know your audience and relate it to your audience. Okay? So those are the first 3 steps: attention getter, credibility, audience relation. The next thing you're going to say in your introduction is your thesis statement or your central idea. Those two can be kind of used interchangeably. That's what we're talking about. So that's a 1-sentence summary of your speech. 1 sentence. 1 complete sentence. So your thesis statement shouldn't be Lucille Ball, because that's not a full sentence. Your thesis statement shouldn't be a paragraph about who she is. Your thesis statement should be 1 simple sentence. If someone said, "What's your speech about?" and you had 1 sentence to tell them, that's what your central idea is. So, for example, Lucille Ball is one of America's most treasured actresses and comedians. Full stop. That's the central idea. Or you could say, "Today I will inform you about the actress Lucille Ball," because that's also a sentence and that's also directly what you're going to do today to tell us about. So you can either make it a sentence that kind of summarizes what your topic is, or you can tell us, "Today I will inform you about," insert your topic. Either one of those is perfectly acceptable. So that's your central idea. Okay? And finally, the last thing in your introduction is going to be your preview. So your preview is where you are going to insert those 3 main ideas that we discussed in this first video for your body of your speech. So you've already done that part, really. All you have to do is say, "Today I will discuss A, B, and C," whatever your 3 main topics are. So for example, today I will discuss her childhood, her comedic career, and her life after I Love Lucy. That's your preview. You list the 3 main things you're about to talk about. That's the tell them what you're going to tell them part. And it seems like you might not need to do that, but like I said, it's really important to kind of keep repeating yourself in speeches like this so people can stay and follow along with you. Then right after you say, these are the 3 things we're going to talk about, you say, first, let's talk about her childhood. That's something called a signpost or a transition. So you say, first, let's talk about her childhood. That's called a signpost. It's the very first one. Now, within the body of your speech, you will do something called transitioning, where you will take us from point A to point B. Okay? So after that, so quick recap are introductions, attention getter, where you hook them, credibility, where you tell them why you should listen to me, audience relation, why you should listen at all, why you should care about this, thesis, which is a 1-sentence capsule of your entire speech with your central idea, and the 5th thing is a preview. Today we will talk about A, B, and C. Then you'll say, first, let's talk about A. So for example, you would say, first, let's talk about her childhood. And then you would talk about that childhood. So again, this is where you have the first main point, and you have your support underneath. And then you have that transition. That's really important. That's something we didn't get to talk about in that first video. That's really, really important. You have to take us from that first main point to that second main point. How do you do that? It's really, really easy. All you do is say, now that we've talked about A, let's talk about B. That's all you have to do. So now that we've talked about her childhood, let's now discuss her comedic career. And then you would do the same thing. You would have that second main point. You'd have all your support. And then after you finish that second main point, you would say, now that we've discussed her comedic career, let's look at her life after I Love Lucy, which is your third main point. And then you'd finish that out. So you have to make sure to bring us from point A to point B, which it's really, really important that you do that so that we can keep up and follow along with you. Now, after you've done that introduction and you're telling them what you're going to tell them, then you do that body and you tell them. The final thing you'll do is called your conclusion, which is where you tell them what you just told them. So your conclusion is going to consist of just 3 main parts. That's going to be a review or summary statement. You're going to restate your thesis, and then you're going to wrap up. So a review is exactly like your preview, but past tense. All you do is say, today we talked about Lucy's childhood, her most famous show, I Love Lucy, and her life after the show ended. That's it. You just say, these are things we just talked about. Then after you do your review, you will do your restate thesis, which is exactly what it sounds like. You just, whatever your central idea, your thesis statement was in the introduction, you're going to just put it down there in the conclusion. Today, I informed you about Lucille Ball, right? That's all you have to do. You can reword the central idea a little bit to make it say kind of the same thing, but a different way. Or you can just take that past tense, today I will inform you, and put, today I informed you. And that's it. And then the final thing you're going to do is called a wrap up. So what I do not ever want you to do is say, that's it. That's all I got. I'm done talking. Please don't do that. I'm begging you. Please don't do that. Don't ever do that. Okay, what you want to do is wrap up in a way that feels final. Okay, so a really good idea is to tie it back to your attention getter in some way. That is a really good way to do it. It's a way to kind of say, all right, now we're done. It's full circle. It's nice. You can do an audience motivation where you say, if you want to know more about Lucille Ball, visit these websites. And then wrap up, or you can just do the wrap up, whatever you feel is best for your speech. So wrap up, to tie back to the attention getter, you say, now that you know the basics about Lucille Ball, when you see a rerun on TV, you can fully appreciate her comedic genius, right? Because we start at the beginning, how many of you have seen the show I Love Lucy? And now we call it back to that in a nice circle and wrap it up. Now that when you see reruns on TV, you'll know more about the person behind the show, right? Because we've tied it all together now. So the wrap-up should feel final. You shouldn't introduce any new information, and you should make sure that it's delivered in a way that feels final, right? We don't want you to be like, and maybe you'll know more about the thing, and then another thing, and then everyone sits there like, do we clap? Are you done? I don't know. You should deliver it in a way that seems like it's final. And we'll talk about delivery in another video. But those are the 3 main components of the conclusion. You review your statements, your main body points, you restate your thesis, and you do a wrap up. So now we've discussed all together your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'm happy to answer those for you.